Hello and welcome to this edition of the Airport News Show, a half-hour program about the Jacksonville Aviation Authority. I'm Debbie Jones, Community Relations Administrator. Jacksonville Aviation Authority manages an airport system comprised of 4 airports. On today's show, we'll be talking about 3 of those airports. And I want to introduce my special guest for today's program, starting with Mr. Rusty Chandler, who is the manager at Cecil Field Airport. Welcome, Rusty.
Oh, thank you, Debbie.
And next is Ms. Tiffany Gillum, who is the manager of Craig Airport. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you, Debbie.
And then last but certainly not least is Mr. Doug Fayor, who is the manager of Herlong Airport. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you.
So our topic today is you, the 3 other airports, Jacksonville International Airport being, of course, the number 4 in our 4 airport system. So in case people don't really understand what differentiates the Jacksonville International Airport from the 3 airports you manage, what is that difference? Rusty, can you kind of fill us in?
Yeah, general aviation, everybody's familiar with commercial aviation. That is where you go, get on a plane, you pay passenger and you fly. But that's only a small percentage of aviation. All the other types of aviation, you've got commercial aviation, we all know about, military aviation, and then everything else is categorized as general aviation. And it is at your community airport. It could be anything from bug sprayers to the police to private ownership of an aircraft maintenance, avionics work, training. Anything you can imagine is general aviation outside of that commercial aviation.
So can general aviation aircraft land at a commercial airport?
Certainly. They can land at a commercial airport, but they have to go into a general aviation parking area. They can't land in an airport and then go to the terminal because that would break security regulations from the TSA and FAA regulations. Typically, general aviation aircraft use GA airports, short for general aviation, GA. And they use that because it's easier to get in and out of. It is not as high density traffic as the commercial. Commercial traffic, I don't want to say they get priority, but they use those commercial airports. And there's, out of the, I think there's just over 19,000 airports in the nation. And just over 500 are commercial airports. So all the rest, private or public, are general aviation airports. And that includes all your business and your corporate aviation as well.
Well, you mentioned the security aspect that a commercial airport has. Is that why a commercial plane cannot land at a general aviation? What are the difference? I understand that commercial airports have a very specific certification process. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, that certification is an FAR Part 139, and that is an airport that is determined that it has a need to be a commercial airport. Not just any airport can be a commercial airport. You just can't say, I want to start doing passengers. There has to be a need there, and the FAA and for us, the state, the FDOT, particularly the FAA, have to recognize that need. Excuse me. And then you fall under a 139 certification. What is that? There are several different items that you have to enhance, and that is aircraft rescue firefighting, law enforcement support, TSA support, and security is probably the biggest. You have to have identified areas, sterile areas, secure areas, display areas to ensure the safety and security of the traveling public. General aviation airports have security, but it is typically not as stringent as a Part 139 or commercial airport.
And they certainly don't have the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, passenger screening facilities at a general aviation. That's a big difference.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you for kind of bringing us up to speed on the difference between a commercial and a GA or general aviation airport. So let's talk about the general aviation airports that the JAA manages here in Jacksonville. 3 different airports, so I'm going to sort of ask each of you to sort of explain to us, how does the airport you manage fit into the overall aviation airport system here in Jacksonville? And we just heard from you, but I'm going to jump to the end of the line and ask Doug if you could give us that information about Herlong.
Well, as Rusty stated, there's numerous types of operations that take place at a general aviation airport, and Herlong is no different than that. We Primarily, we're a recreation airport, but we have the corporate traveler, we have the mosquito spraying, and various other types of operations. Primarily, we are a recreation airport, but again, we do a number of things. One of the things that sets Hurlong apart from all of the other 4 airports is the fact that we're an uncontrolled field. We do not have a control tower. And it's
Well, that sounds ominous, uncontrolled. Okay. Would you explain that?
Sure. It's basically it's up to the pilots to provide the separation from other aircraft. So there's a common traffic advisory frequency that they all tune into and communicate to ensure that they don't collide, and that's how they communicate. So each pilot knows where the other one is, hopefully. So and because it's an uncontrolled field, it allows us to do some things that are typically different than, say, Cecil Field or JIA. We have skydive operations, we have glider operations, we have ultralights. A lot of different entities like to use our airport because it is uncontrolled, because they can get in quick and get out quick. For example, Quest Diagnostics, who they fly the tests from hospitals like blood work and DNA testing. They'll pick that up at our airport because they can get in quick. They can unload it quick because there's not as many security restrictions on them. And they can get and go and have the stuff tested and back to a hospital or a doctor's office that needs it rapidly. So we do those kind of things at Hurlong as well.
So I hadn't thought about the fact that there was no control tower. That really helps facilitate some of the recreational uses.
Right.
That's a little more restrictive under an airport that has a control tower.
Right, as well as different types of businesses and training. JSO, you'll see the helicopter at Hurlong quite a bit. It's easy for them to get in and do their training, then get a lot of work in. Angel flights, where children are flown up to Tennessee. I think it's St. Jude's. Frequently, you'll have an angel flight going up there, and we have a lot of angel flights coming in, going to like Mayo Clinic, and they like to use Hurlong because it's uncontrolled. They can get in quickly and get out quickly.
Now, another part of the recreational flying, you mentioned several people build their own aircraft as well, and do they like to use Hurlong as opposed to another GA airport?
Right. It's there are experimental aircraft at our airport. They like to use our airport. They kind of fit in there, and but they use it just as well as any certificated aircraft. So.
And blimps. Do you have blimps?
Oh yeah, the Goodyear blimp at one point in time had entertained basing at Hurlong, but when there's an event, they typically come to Hurlong as opposed to Craig. Sometimes they would go to Craig and other blimps as well, but mainly they go to Hurlong Airport because of the ease of getting in and out, no control tower. Plus, you got to remember they have a number of people that come in on the ground to help them secure the blimp, and a lot of field work that goes on. So coming to an airport that is uncontrolled, if you will, and the security requirements are less stringent, it makes it easier for them to operate, and that's why they choose Hurlong.
Okay, well, very interesting. Thank you for that. Now, moving to Craig Airport, Tiffany, what is unique about Craig and its function as part of the aviation system?
Well, to piggyback off what Rusty said earlier, when you talk about Part 139 and commercial traffic, it's busy. Craig is designated as a reliever airport for Jacksonville International Airport. So we have a vast variety of GA aviation at Craig Airport, a lot of business and corporate activity at the airport, as well as flight training. We have 4 flight training facilities at the airport, and we also do our aviation, JSO aviation facility is there, mosquito control is there. We also do blimp operations as well. We just recently had Snoopy one there. So what I like about Craig, and I think what differentiates us from the other airports, is that we are a reliever airport for Jacksonville International. When you talk about the business community, we're centrally located, minutes from downtown, not too far from the beach, Mayo Clinic, and about 20 minutes away from Jacksonville International Airport.
When you say a business reliever, does that mean that people are encouraged to go there to lessen the traffic at Jacksonville International? What does it mean, a business reliever airport?
Yes. we have 2 fixed base operators there, so it lends itself and makes it more attractive to business and corporate activity at the airport. So we are trying to relieve some of the stress and traffic at Jacksonville International, because it is a commercial services airport. Not to say that general aviation or corporate activity could not go there, because we do have general aviation activity that uses their fixed base operators as well there.
Can you explain what a fixed base operator is? Not necessarily Tiffany, but who?
Yeah.
What is a? We abbreviate it FBO, but it does stand for fixed based operator. What is that?
A fixed-based operator is, I always kind of compare it to if you're driving down a highway or an interstate or a thruway, you have that little exit you pull off, and you don't get off the thruway, but you kind of pull off, and there's gas, and there's food, and there's restrooms, and some shopping, little area. That's what, they're a service provider. And when you fly into an airport, how do they get service? Do they just sit down and park, get out of the plane and walk? No, there is a service provider there, which is a fixed-based operator, which is a business for hire, and they provide all those services. I mean, they can give you, they'll park the aircraft, they'll fuel it, they'll store it, provide maintenance, get you a rental car, catering, anything that the pilot, the traveling public that is flying, the general aviation, they'll take care of everything for you. And that's the service provider. Fixed-based operator is a generic industry term, and it's been abbreviated to FBO.
Okay, great. Well, good segue, Rusty, because tell us about Cecil Field. What is Cecil Field's role in the airport system?
Cecil Field's role is kind of unique. You know, we came in to the Aviation Authority late in 1999, and our role it kind of differs. We're a general aviation airport like Doug at Hurlong and Tiffany at Craig, but our role is more manufacturing and rework and overhaul. That's kind of our focus. And we look at primarily maintaining larger aircraft or Department of Defense aircraft, like the Boeing company, which does the F-18 work, and Flight Star that does the commercial aircraft. But on the other hand, we have several operators out there, and we have a lot of military operators, and we have Department of Homeland Security, Coast Guard, Customs, and Army National Guard. And then we have a training component also, and that's with the FCCJ, Aviation Center of Excellence. But that's kind of our role. We still service the general flying community. Throughout the day and night, we have aircraft that will be doing prax approaches, or they want to fly in and land and get some service and fly back out. We have aircraft from both Craig and Hurlong that come over and do some touch and goes and land, get some gas, and then take back off again.
Right. And why would they choose Cecil Field for touch and goes? Have you got a long runway or something?
A long runway. They can get like 5 approaches on the long runway. You know, there's a lot of options there. I think Cecil is kind of, I don't want to say the airport of choice, but it's like Hurlong. We're kind of stuck out on the west side. And if you get into Craig and JIA and NES Jacksonville and Mayport, the airspace is kind of congested. Just like it is on the ground around the city, it's fairly congested. And you drive out to the west side, it's typically not that congested. You can, you know, you don't have to wait for lights. Well, if they're red, you do. But you get to drive right through. And that's the kind of like the airspace is up there. It is not as congested. So they can come, and for the gas and the time they're spending in the aircraft, which means money, they can get a lot of touch and goes.
Well,
a lot of practice approaches.
Very good. And so all combined, the 3 general aviation airports really serve to reduce the congestion that would be that could potentially be at JIA, at Jacksonville International. And that's a good thing, especially if you're paying for a ticket, because I like to tell people you're always next in line for landing and takeoff at JAX because of that. Well, very good. You mentioned that that Cecil Field is a newer entrant into the airport system. So let's talk a little bit about the history of these 3 airports and how we as a city came to have such a great diversified airport system. So Doug, you want to tell us, how did Hurlong get to be part of the airport system?
Well, our airport started off pretty much the same way. During World War II, the airports were built to facilitate